The Riviera Palace gleamed under a 1930s moon, its marble halls whispering of wealth and secrets. Ambassador Victor Renard dined alone in his opulent suite, a champagne flute sparkling in his hand. By midnight he was dead, poisoned, his face frozen in a grimace of betrayal. The locked door baffled the staff, and whispers of murder rippled through the elite hotel. Hercule Poirot, summoned from a nearby villa, surveyed the scene. Shattered glass, a cryptic note reading, "The Viper strikes," and a missing diplomatic letter. In this gilded cage a killer lurked. The game, Poirot mused, was afoot. Chapter 1. The Shadow in the Suite. The Riviera Palace stood like a gleaming jewel against the velvet night of the French Riviera, its marble facade bathed in the soft glow of a 1930s moon. The hotel, perched above the azure Mediterranean, was a sanctuary for the elite, diplomats, aristocrats, and those with secrets to guard. Its chandeliers cast prisms of light across polished floors, and the air carried the faint scent of jasmine from the gardens below. Within its opulent walls, whispers of intrigue were as common as the clink of champagne glasses. Yet, on this fateful night, the palace held a darker secret: murder. Ambassador Victor Renard, a man whose charm masked a labyrinth of schemes, dined alone in his suite on the 5th floor. The room, a masterpiece of Art Deco elegance, boasted silk drapes, a mahogany desk, and a balcony overlooking the sea's endless expanse. Renard, in his late 40s, was a figure of prominence in diplomatic circles, known for his sharp wit and sharper ambitions. His evening began with a solitary meal: roasted quail, asparagus in hollandaise, and a bottle of vintage champagne, its bubbles catching the lamplight. By midnight, the ambassador was dead. The discovery came shortly after, when a maid, Marie, entered to clear the table. She found Renard slumped in his velvet armchair, his face contorted in a grimace of agony. The champagne flute lay shattered. A diplomatic letter, half torn, was conspicuously absent, its wax seal crumbling in the fireplace. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers tracing the air above Renard's rigid form. The ambassador's eyes, wide with shock, seemed to accuse the very walls. The poison, Poirot deduced, was no common toxin. Its speed suggested an alkaloid, rare and precise, accessible only to those with specialized knowledge. He noted the champagne bottle, still half full, and the faint residue in the glass's shards. A single sip had been enough. The locked door intrigued him most, a puzzle within a puzzle. How had the killer entered and escaped undetected? The answer, he knew, lay in the details. The detective turned his attention to the room's finer points. The balcony, though locked, offered a view of the cliffs below, where waves crashed in rhythmic fury. A faint scratch on the lock caught his eye, barely visible in the moonlight. Inside, a silver cigarette case gleamed on a side table, engraved with initials not Renard's: F.A. A red herring, perhaps, or a clue to the killer's identity. Poirot's little gray cells began to hum, piecing together the fragments of this gilded cage. The missing letter, rumored to contain secrets of international import, hinted at motives beyond personal vendettas. Marie, the maid, was questioned first. Trembling, she recounted overhearing a heated argument from Renard's suite hours before his death. Voices, monsieur, she whispered, angry but muffled. I couldn't hear the words. She swore no one had entered after Renard retired, yet her eyes darted nervously. Poirot noted her fear, genuine but tinged with something unspoken. Was she protecting someone, or merely shaken by death's proximity? He dismissed her gently, his mind already cataloging suspects. The hotel buzzed with speculation. Guests whispered of Renard's enemies. A scorned mistress, a rival diplomat, a disgraced ally. The Riviera Palace was no stranger to scandal. Arnaud, the physician who certified Renard's death. Each suspect, Poirot mused, had motive and opportunity. Elise's public quarrels with Renard were notorious, her passion a potential spark for violence. Brant's rivalry, cloaked in political ambition, hinted at darker designs. Celeste's financial ties to Renard raised questions of desperation. Pierre's quiet resentment could mask a vengeful heart, and Arnaud's medical expertise made him a candidate for the poison's source. Yet motives alone were not enough. Poirot needed evidence, and the suite held more secrets than it revealed. He examined the fireplace where the letter's seal lay in ashes. A faint trace of wax clung to the grate, suggesting haste. The killer had burned evidence, but why leave the note? Was it a taunt, a misdirection, or a genuine warning? Poirot's gaze returned to the cigarette case. The initials F.A. pointed to Dr. Arnaud, but such an obvious clue felt contrived. A planted distraction, perhaps, to divert suspicion. The scratch on the balcony lock nagged at him. An anomaly in an otherwise perfect crime. The night deepened, and the hotel's glamour seemed to dim under the weight of death. Guests lingered in the lobby, their conversations hushed, their eyes wary. Poirot stood alone in the suite, the sea's murmur a distant lullaby. He closed his eyes, letting the facts align like stars in a constellation. The poison, the note, the letter, the lock. Each was a thread in a tapestry of deceit. The viper, whoever they were, had struck with precision. But Poirot was no stranger to such games. His holiday, it seemed, was over. The detective's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. A porter delivered a message. A witness had come forward, claiming to have seen a figure on the balcony before Renard's death. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The game was indeed afoot, dress clinging to her slender frame. Yet her beauty was marred by red-rimmed eyes and a trembling lip, signs of either profound grief or calculated performance. She sat on a wrought-iron bench, clutching a silk handkerchief embroidered with her initials, E.M. Poirot. Ever observant, noted its pristine condition. Had it been used to wipe tears or merely held for effect? Mademoiselle Moreau, Poirot began, his voice gentle but probing. You were close to Monsieur Renard. Tell me, what passed between you last evening? His eyes, sharp as a falcon's, watched her every movement. Elise's gaze flickered to the ground, her fingers tightening around the handkerchief. We quarreled, she admitted, her voice low but laced with defiance. Victor promised to leave his wife for me, but he lied. Again. He said his career came first, always. Her words carried the weight of betrayal, but Poirot sensed a deeper current of anger. The detective leaned forward, his mustache twitching slightly. And this quarrel. It was public, the guests in the dining room overheard. Tell me, did you visit his suite afterward? Elise's eyes widened, a flash of panic crossing her face. I went to his door, she stammered, but he wouldn't let me in. I left before 9. Her voice wavered, and Poirot noted the hesitation. A lie, perhaps, or a half-truth? He pressed further, asking about the champagne Renard drank before his death. Elise's cheeks flushed. I don't know about any champagne, she snapped, too quickly. Poirot's mind catalogued the details. The hotel's guest log provided by Monsieur Lefebvre confirmed Elise had been seen near Renard's suite at 8:30 p.m., shortly before the estimated time of death. A waiter, Jacques, recalled serving her a glass of champagne in the lounge earlier that evening, though he couldn't confirm if it was from the same bottle sent to Renard's room. The poison, an alkaloid requiring expertise to procure, suggested a deliberate act. Could Elise, scorned and human? Note found in Renard's suite. Trust no one. The viper strikes. Did she know of any viper? Elise shook her head, but her fingers twisted the handkerchief into knots. Victor had enemies, she said vaguely. Diplomats always do. Her evasiveness intrigued Poirot, who sensed she knew more than she admitted. The interview was interrupted by a discovery in the hotel lobby. A porter, cleaning near the grand staircase, found a torn scrap of paper wedged beneath a vase. It matched the diplomatic letter missing from Renard's suite, its wax seal partially intact. The fragment bore a single phrase: "The treaty must not." The rest was gone, burned or hidden. Poirot examined the scrap, its edges singed, and deduced it was part of the document Renard had guarded so closely. Its mention of a treaty pointed to espionage, a motive that could implicate any of the suspects, including Elise. Poirot returned to Elise, showing her the fragment. "This letter, mademoiselle. It was important to Monsieur Renard. Did he speak of it?" Elise's face paled, and she shook her head vigorously. "He never shared his work with me," she insisted. But her eyes betrayed her, lingering on the paper a moment too long. Poirot let the silence stretch, a tactic to unsettle. Finally, Elise stood, her movements abrupt. "I've told you everything," she said, her voice sharp. "I need air." She turned to leave, but as she did, a small glass vial slipped from her handbag, rolling across the stone path. Poirot's reflexes were swift. He retrieved the vial before Elise could, holding it to the light. It was unlabeled, its contents a clear liquid. "What is this, mademoiselle?" he asked, his tone deceptively mild. Elise froze, her breath catching. "It's perfume," she stammered. "Nothing more." But her eyes were wide with fear, and Poirot knew perfume did not inspire such terror. He pocketed the vial, promising to return it after examination. Elise's protests were feeble, and she fled the garden, her heels clicking bottle. Or was she merely a convenient scapegoat? The poison's rarity pointed to someone with access to specialized substances, and Elise, a socialite, seemed an unlikely candidate. Yet her emotional volatility made her unpredictable. The detective's thoughts turned to the other suspects. Colonel Hugo Brandt, a German diplomat, had clashed with Renard over trade negotiations, his military demeanor hinting at ruthlessness. Madame Celeste Dubois, the hotel's owner, faced financial ruin due to Reynard's unpaid debts. Pierre Laurent, the valet, harbored a grudge after Reynard's public humiliation. Dr. Felix Arnaud, who certified the death, had a past tied to Reynard's diplomatic circle. Each had opportunity, but the method, poison in a locked room, required cunning and precision. Poirot paused in the lobby, the chandelier's light casting shadows across his face. The missing letter, the viper's warning, and now Elise's vial formed a constellation of clues, but the pattern was incomplete. He recalled the scratch on the balcony lock, a detail yet to be explained. Was there a hidden entry to the suite, or was the lock a distraction? The cigarette case with initials F.A. pointed to Dr. Arnaud, but its prominence felt staged. Poirot distrusted obvious clues. They were often the work of a clever mind. As he pondered, a bellboy approached with news. The groundskeeper who saw the cloaked figure on Reynard's balcony wished to speak. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The witness might clarify the timeline, but he suspected more misdirection. The Riviera Palace was a stage, its players hiding behind masks of wealth and decorum. Elise's tears, genuine or not, were but one act in this drama. The detective straightened his tie, his resolve firm. The viper, whoever they were, had underestimated Hercule Poirot. Chapter 3. The Colonel's Ambition. The Riviera Palace hummed with the restrained elegant suit and polished cane approached with a courteous nod. "Colonel Brant," he began, "you knew Monsieur Renard well, oui? Perhaps too well for friendship." Brant's gaze flicked to Poirot, sharp and unyielding. "Renard was a fool," he said, his voice clipped with a faint German accent. "His policies weakened the trade treaty we both served. He cared more for his ego than diplomacy." The words were cold, but Poirot detected a flicker of disdain, personal, not merely professional. He invited Brant to sit, choosing a leather armchair that allowed him to observe the Colonel's every gesture. The detective's little gray cells were alert, seeking the truth beneath Brant's disciplined exterior. Poirot began with the evening of the murder. "You are seen near Monsieur Renard's suite, delivering documents, I understand?" Brant nodded curtly. "Routine correspondence," he said. "I left it at his door at 8 o'clock. Poirot raised an eyebrow. The guest log confirmed Brant's presence on the 5th floor, but a porter recalled him lingering longer than necessary, pacing the corridor. When pressed, Brant's alibi emerged. A late-night card game in the lounge with a fellow diplomat, Herr Schmidt. Yet Schmidt, when questioned earlier, had hesitated, his account vague on timings. A crack in the story, Poirot noted. The detective shifted to the poison, a rare alkaloid that had felled Renard with brutal efficiency. "Such a substance," Poirot mused, "requires knowledge, perhaps military, perhaps scientific. You have served in campaigns, Colonel. Are such toxins familiar to you?" Brant's eyes narrowed, but his voice remained steady. "I am a soldier, not a chemist," he replied. "If you seek poisoners, look to those with access to laboratories." His deflection was smooth, but Poirot sensed evasion. A man of Brant's rank would have connections, perhaps even to illicit markets. The conversation turned to the missing diplomatic letter, its wax seal found crumbling in Renard's fireplace. Poirot produced the torn scrap found in the lobby. Its words, "The treaty must not." Face remained impassive. "Diplomatic circles are full of code names," he said dismissively. Renard was paranoid. It meant nothing. Yet his fingers drummed briefly on the armrest, a rare lapse in composure. Poirot's thoughts returned to the crime scene. The locked door, the scratched balcony lock, the silver cigarette case with initials F.A. Each detail was a thread in the tapestry of murder. Brandt, with his access to Renard's floor, could have exploited a hidden opportunity. But the poison's rarity suggested specialized knowledge, and Brandt's military background, while extensive, leaned more toward strategy than chemistry. Still, his shaky alibi and lingering presence near the suite raised questions. Was he delivering documents, or something more sinister? The detective decided to test Brandt's nerve. "Colonel, a witness claims a figure was seen on Renard's balcony. A woman, perhaps, in a cloak. Yet you were nearby. Did you see anything unusual?" Brandt's eyes flickered, but he shook his head. "I saw no one," he said firmly. "I was at cards by 9. Poirot smiled thinly, letting the silence stretch. Lies, he knew, often crumbled under scrutiny. He changed tack, mentioning Elise Moreau's vial, now sent for analysis. "A curious item," Poirot said. "Could it be the poison source?" Brandt shrugged. "The girl was desperate. Renard humiliated her." The mention of Elise shifted the conversation. Brandt suggested her affair with Renard gave her motive, but Poirot noted his eagerness to deflect. Was Brandt shielding himself or sowing suspicion? The detective recalled the groundskeeper's account of the cloaked figure dropping a glove embroidered with E. It pointed to Elise, but Poirot distrusted such obvious clues. A red herring, perhaps, planted to mislead. Brandt, with his strategic mind, could orchestrate such a deception, but so could others in this nest of intrigue. Poirot excused himself briefly, stepping into the corridor to confer with Monsieur Lefebvre. The manager, still anxious about the hotel's reputation, guarding a secret. The card game alibi needed scrutiny, and Herr Schmidt would face questions again. As Poirot exited the lounge, a maid approached, her face pale. She had found another clue. A coded message tucked inside a book in the hotel library, addressed to H.B. The note, written in German, contained cryptic phrases. "Viper awaits. Treaty secured." Poirot's pulse quickened. The initials matched Brandt's, and the mention of the Viper echoed Renard's warning. Was Brandt the traitor, or was he being framed? The code required deciphering, a task for Poirot's friend in Nice, a cryptographer of repute. For now, the note was a tantalizing lead, deepening the mystery. The detective returned to the crime scene in his mind. The poison, delivered via champagne, required access to Renard's suite. Brandt's presence on the 5th floor, combined with the skeleton key, made him a viable suspect. Yet the cigarette case and glove pointed elsewhere. Arnaud and Elise, respectively. Poirot suspected a web of misdirection, each clue designed to obscure the truth. The diplomatic letter, with its talk of treaties and traitors, suggested a motive beyond personal grudges. Brandt's ambition, tied to the treaty, could drive him to murder, but the method felt too subtle for a soldier. The Riviera Palace's glamour seemed to fade as Poirot stood in the corridor. the weight of the case pressing upon him. The suspects, Brandt, Elise, Celeste, Pierre, Arnaud, each held a piece of the puzzle, but the Viper's identity remained elusive. The coded message was a breakthrough, yet it raised more questions. Was Brandt the mastermind, or a pawn in a larger game? The detective's thoughts were interrupted by a porter who reported a disturbance. Brandt had been seen arguing with Dr. Arnaud in the garden, their voices raised. Poirot's mustache twitched. The game was shifting, alliances and animosities coming to light. He would follow this new lead, and polished mahogany overlooking the Mediterranean. Celeste, in her early 40s, exuded a poised allure. Her silver blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon, her emerald dress accentuating her graceful movements. Her eyes, however, held a guarded intensity, as if she anticipated every question before it was asked. Poirot, seated across from her, adjusted his cufflinks, his demeanor courteous but piercing. "Madame Dubois," he began, "the Riviera Palace is your kingdom, yet it harbors a crime. What can you tell me of Monsieur Renard's final hours?" Celeste's smile was practiced, a blend of warmth and deflection. "Victor was a valued guest," she said, her voice smooth as the sea beyond. "His death is a tragedy for us all." Poirot noted the careful neutrality of her words, devoid of personal grief. He pressed further, mentioning Renard's unpaid debts which, according to the hotel's ledger, amounted to thousands, enough to strain even a palace's coffers. Celeste's expression flickered, a momentary crack in her composure. "He promised payment," she said coolly. "Diplomats often delay, but Victor was reliable." Her fingers brushed a jade paperweight, betraying a hint of unease. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "Reliable, perhaps, but not without enemies. A groundskeeper saw you near Monsieur Renard's balcony at dusk. What brought you there, madam?" Celeste's gaze hardened, but her voice remained steady. "I often walk the grounds to ensure the hotel's perfection," she replied. "I saw nothing unusual." Yet Poirot detected a tremor in her tone, subtle but telling. The groundskeeper's account placed her near the suite's private entrance, a detail she omitted. Was it oversight or deliberate concealment? The detective shifted to the crime itself. The poison, a rare alkaloid, delivered via champagne. The locked door, the missing diplomatic letter. "This letter," Poirot said, producing the senses. Yet the match with its faint scent of sulfur suggested a presence in the room, perhaps hers. As they spoke, a knock interrupted. A porter delivered a message. The hotel's safe where Celeste stored sensitive documents had been accessed the night of the murder. Poirot's interest piqued. "Your safe, madame. Might it hold something of Monsieur Renard's?" Celeste's face paled, but she recovered quickly. "My safe contains only hotel records," she said. "Nothing of Victor's." Poirot requested to inspect it, and after a moment's hesitation she agreed, leading him to a discreet vault behind a portrait in her office. The safe's contents were orderly, ledgers, contracts, but a small envelope caught Poirot's eye tucked beneath a stack. He opened it with Celeste's reluctant permission, revealing a photograph. Celeste and Renard arm in arm at a gala years prior. Her smile in the image was genuine, unlike the guarded one she wore now. "A memento," she said quickly. "We were friends, nothing more." But Poirot sensed a deeper connection. Romantic, perhaps, or professional. The photograph suggested intimacy, a motive for jealousy or betrayal. Had Celeste's financial desperation, compounded by personal ties, driven her to murder? The safe held no trace of the diplomatic letter, but its absence was as telling as its presence. Poirot returned to the crime scene in his mind. The locked door, the scratched balcony lock, the cigarette case with initials F.A. Each clue pointed in multiple directions. Celeste's presence near the balcony aligned with the groundskeeper's account, but the silk glove embroidered with E suggested Elise Moreau. Was Celeste being framed, or was she orchestrating a diversion? The burned match intrigued him most. Its presence in Renard's suite hinted at someone burning evidence, perhaps the letter's remains. Celeste, a non-smoker, had no obvious reason to carry matches, yet her proximity to the crime scene raised questions. The detective's thoughts were interrupted by a commotion. Authority over the hotel gave her unmatched access, a fact she downplayed. He mentioned the coded message found in the library, addressed to H.B. Brandt, presumably. Did she know of such correspondence? "Guests are entitled to their privacy," she replied, her tone icy. Poirot's mind raced, weaving connections. Celeste's financial strain, her presence near the balcony, the photograph, all pointed to motive and opportunity. Yet the poison's rarity suggested expertise she lacked, unless she had an accomplice. The Viper's warning loomed large, its code name tying the crime to espionage. Celeste's charm and control made her a formidable player, but was she the mastermind or a pawn? The burned match and fabric were tantalizing clues, but their purpose, evidence, or misdirection remained unclear. As the interview ended, Celeste rose, her composure restored. "Monsieur Poirot, I trust you'll resolve this quickly. The palace cannot afford scandal." Poirot smiled thinly. "Scandal, madame, is born of secrets, and I intend to uncover them all." He left her office, his cane tapping rhythmically. In the lobby, he learned of a new development. A guest had overheard Celeste speaking to Dr. Arnaud the night of the murder, their voices hushed but urgent. The doctor, with his medical expertise, could be the key to the poison's source. Poirot paused by the grand staircase, the chandelier's light casting shadows across his face. The suspects, Celeste, Brandt, Elise, Pierre, Arnaud, formed a constellation of motives: money, ambition, love, revenge, betrayal. The diplomatic letter, with its whispers of a traitor, suggested a motive beyond personal gain. Celeste's photograph and her presence near the balcony were damning, yet the glove and cigarette case pointed elsewhere. Poirot distrusted the obvious, knowing the Viper's cunning lay in deception. The hotel's glamour seemed to dim as Poirot contemplated the next move. The coded message, the burned fabric, the skeleton key, each was a thread in the tapestry of murder. Celeste's guarded demeanor hid something, but the young valet whose quiet demeanor masked a simmering resentment, a grudge that could fester into something lethal. Poirot found Pierre in the hotel's service quarters, a warren of narrow corridors and linen-stocked rooms far from the guests' opulent world. The air here was cooler, laced with the faint tang of polish and starch, a reminder of the unseen labor that sustained the palace's facade. Pierre, in his early 20s, was a slender youth with tousled dark hair and eyes that darted like a cornered animal's. His uniform, crisp yet ill-fitting, spoke of ambition curtailed. He was folding linens when Poirot entered, his movements pausing as the detective's cane tapped a rhythmic greeting on the stone floor. "Monsieur Laurent," Poirot said, his voice mild as a summer breeze. "You served Monsieur Renard closely. A valet sees much, hears more. What can you tell me of his final evening?" Pierre's hands stilled, the linen slipping slightly from his grasp. He straightened, but his posture betrayed tension. Shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. "Monsieur Poirot," he replied, his French accent thick with the provinces. "I brought his dinner at 7, as always. Champagne from the kitchen." He was alone, reading papers. His words were measured, but Poirot noted the avoidance of Renard's gaze in recollection, as if the memory burned. The detective gestured to a wooden stool, inviting Pierre to sit. They faced each other across a scarred table, the valet's fingers twisting a cloth napkin into knots. Poirot began gently, recounting the crime. The locked suite, the shattered champagne flute, the poison's swift embrace. "You handled the tray, oui? The bottle, the glass. Your hands touched what killed him." Pierre's face paled, his eyes widening. "I swear, monsieur, it was untouched when I left. I locked the door behind me as per his orders." Yet Poirot sensed evasion, a shadow behind the youth's earnestness. Pressing further, Poirot delved into Pierre's history with Renard. The valet had served the ambassador for 6 months, a position service, but I used it only for the tray. Poirot leaned in, his eyes gleaming. The passage, a relic of the palace's construction, ran parallel to the guest floors, accessible via a concealed panel. It could explain the locked door's mystery, entry and exit without a trace. Pierre's knowledge made him a suspect, his grudge a spark. A new clue emerged as Poirot spoke. During the initial search of Renard's suite, a monogrammed cufflink had been found beneath the armchair, engraved with P.L., Pierre's initials. The detective produced it from his pocket, the gold gleaming dully. "This was yours, monsieur?" Pierre's breath caught, his face draining of color. I lost one weeks ago. Renard must have taken it, as a joke." But Poirot distrusted the convenience. A cufflink in the death room felt planted, a false trail to ensnare the unwary. "Too obvious," Poirot murmured to himself. "Like breadcrumbs for the foolish." The poison's source remained elusive, a rare alkaloid that demanded expertise. Pierre handled Renard's meals, yes, but the valet's background was humble. No chemistry, no connections to such toxins. Yet his access was unparalleled. Trays, bottles, even the ambassador's private effects. Poirot probed Pierre's alibi for the evening. "You claim a late shift in the kitchens after delivery?" Pierre nodded vigorously. "Until midnight, washing glasses with the others." But when Poirot cross-referenced with the staff roster, discrepancies arose. A cook recalled Pierre vanishing for half an hour around 9:30 p.m., the estimated time of poisoning. "I stepped out for air," Pierre stammered, sweat beading on his brow. The alibi unraveled like cheap thread. As the interview deepened, Poirot wove in threads from prior inquiries. The diplomatic letters fragment, the treaty must not, hinted at espionage. But Pierre's world was domestic, not international. Did Renard confide in him? "Never," Pierre said. He treated me like furniture. Yet, the cryptic note, "Trust no one," echoing softly. The Riviera Palace's underbelly, with its passages and shadows, mirrored the case's complexity. Pierre's grudge was palpable, his access damning. But the method, precise poisoning, felt beyond a valet's reach, unless aided or driven by desperation. The detective tested him further. The groundskeeper saw a cloaked figure on the balcony, dropping a glove with E. The burned fabric near it. "Yours?" Pierre shook his head. "I have no cloak, monsieur." But his denial rang hollow, and Poirot pondered if the youth was a pawn, manipulated by a higher power. Reflecting on the suspects, Poirot saw interconnections. Celeste's financial woes could exploit Pierre's resentment. Brant's ambition might use a disposable tool. Elise's passion, Arnaud's expertise, all wove into the web. The skeleton key, the scratched lock, the cigarette case with F.A., each clue pointed away from Pierre. Yet his cufflink pulled back. Poirot distrusted the balance. The killer sowed confusion masterfully. As evening fell, the palace stirred with dinner preparations, clatter rising from below. Poirot dismissed Pierre, watching him slip away, shoulders slumped. The valet's grudge was real, his alibi fragile, but proof eluded. The detective returned to the lobby, where Monsieur Lefebvre awaited with a report. Pierre had been seen near the sealed suite earlier, lingering. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The game intensified, the viper's shadow lengthening. Night cloaked the Riviera Palace, stars pricking the velvet sky. Poirot retired to his room, but sleep evaded him. The puzzle pieces, grudge, passage, cufflink, demanded alignment. He reviewed notes by lamplight, the sea's murmur a distant counterpoint. Pierre's unraveling alibi suggested complicity, but the viper's espionage tied higher stakes. The detective's mind raced, synapses firing like fireworks. A soft sound from the corridor drew Poirot, and whispers of a prior dispute with the ambassador made him a figure of intrigue. Poirot, ever alert, sensed the doctor's secrets might unlock the case. The detective arranged to meet Arnaud in the hotel's small infirmary, a sterile room tucked behind the bustling kitchens. The air carried the sharp tang of antiseptic, a stark contrast to the palace's perfumed opulence. Arnaud, a lean man in his late 30s with thinning hair and wire-rimmed spectacles, exuded a clinical composure. His white coat was pristine, his movements precise as he arranged medical instruments on a steel tray. Poirot, his cane resting against a chair, observed the doctor's economy of motion, a man accustomed to control, perhaps too much so. "Monsieur le Docteur," Poirot began, his voice smooth but probing. "You certified Monsieur Renard's death as poison. Your expertise, it is invaluable, but also suggestive, oui?" Arnaud's hands paused, a scalpel glinting briefly under the lamp. "Poison was evident," he replied, his tone even. "The symptoms, rigidity, dilated pupils, pointed to an alkaloid. I merely confirmed it." His eyes met Poirot's, steady but guarded, as if measuring the detective's intent. Poirot smiled thinly, his mustache twitching. A man so calm under scrutiny warranted closer inspection. Poirot recounted the crime, the locked suite, the shattered champagne flute, the rare alkaloid that killed with ruthless efficiency. You prescribed for Monsieur Renard, did you not? Medications, perhaps, that could conceal a poison? Arnaud adjusted his spectacles, a faint crease forming on his brow. I gave him sedatives for insomnia, he said. Nothing more. The alkaloid is not in my kit. But Poirot noted the doctor's precision in naming the toxin, a detail unshared with the staff. Did Arnaud know more than he admitted? Or was his expertise merely professional? The detective delved into Arnaud's past, guided by a discreet inquiry to a contact in Nice. Arnaud had once served in familiarity. First name suggested a history beyond diplomacy. Was Arnaud's calm a mask for vengeance? The conversation turned to the missing diplomatic letter, its singed fragment hinting at a traitor and a treaty. You served in such circles, Doctor, Poirot said. This viper, a code name perhaps from your past? Arnaud's face remained impassive, but his fingers tightened on the tray. I left that world, he said. Cod names mean nothing to me now. Yet Poirot sensed evasion, the doctor's composure a shield. The letter's wax seal, found in the fireplace, and the coded message tied to Brandt, deepened the espionage angle. Could Arnaud, with his history, be the viper? A new clue surfaced during the interview. A porter, tidying the infirmary earlier, had found an unlabeled bottle in Arnaud's medical bag, its contents clear and odorless. Poirot requested to see it, and Arnaud complied with reluctance, producing a small vial from a locked drawer. Saline, he said, his voice clipped. For injections. But Poirot recalled Elise's vial, now under analysis, and wondered if Arnaud's held a similar secret. He pocketed it for testing, noting the doctor's fleeting grimace. Was it the poison's source, or another misdirection? Poirot's thoughts returned to the crime scene. The locked door, the scratched balcony lock, the cigarette case with Arnaud's initials, F.A. The case felt too blatant, a planted clue to ensnare the unwary. Yet Arnaud's medical knowledge aligned with the alkaloid's rarity, and his presence near the suite raised questions. The hidden passage, known to Pierre and Celeste, could have been used by Arnaud, bypassing the locked door. The burned match in Renard's suite nagged at Poirot. A non-smoker's room, yet a doctor might carry matches for sterilization. Or was it another false trail? The detective tested Arnaud further. The groundskeeper saw a cloaked figure on the balcony, dropping a glove with E. You were nearby. Did you see such a figure? Poirot rose, pacing the infirmary's confines, his cane tapping rhythmically. The suspects, Elise, Brandt, Celeste, Pierre, Arnaud, formed a constellation of motives: love, ambition, money, revenge, betrayal. Arnaud's expertise and history made him a formidable player, but the cigarette case and glove pointed elsewhere. The burned fabric near the balcony, the skeleton key's mystery. Each clue suggested a killer sowing chaos. Poirot distrusted the obvious, knowing the viper's cunning lay in misdirection. The detective returned to Arnaud, his tone deceptively mild. Your bag, Doctor. It is a treasure trove, oui? This vial, perhaps, holds more than saline. Arnaud's eyes flashed, but he held his ground. Test it, Monsieur Poirot. You'll find nothing. His confidence was unnerving, yet Poirot sensed a bluff. He recalled the library's coded message, mentioning the viper's next move. Arnaud's past in diplomacy, his access to toxins, and his shaky alibi aligned too neatly. But the cufflink, the glove, the match, were they his work or another's? As the interview ended, Arnaud busied himself with his instruments, his movements deliberate. Poirot watched, noting the doctor's precision. A surgeon's hands, capable of life or death. He left the infirmary, the antiseptic scent clinging to his suit. In the corridor, a porter approached with news. The chemist in Nice had preliminary results on Elise's vial. Non-toxic, likely perfume. But Arnaud's vial awaited testing, its contents a potential key. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together fragments. The passage, the poison, the letter's traitor. The Riviera Palace's glamour dimmed as night fell, its halls whispering of betrayal. Poirot paused by a window, the sea's rhythm a counterpoint to his thoughts. Arnaud's secret, tied to Renard's past, was a thread in the tapestry of murder. The Viper's identity loomed closer, but the web of together, to weave their stories into a net that would snare the Viper. In the Grand Salon, under the watchful eyes of gilded portraits, Poirot prepared to tighten the web. The salon was a vision of decadence. Velvet drapes framed tall windows, the Mediterranean's twilight glimmering beyond, while a grand piano stood silent in the corner. Poirot had summoned the suspects: Elise Moreau, Colonel Hugo Brandt, Madame Celeste Dubois, Pierre Laurent, and Dr. Felix Arnaud, to this opulent arena. They arrived one by one, their faces a gallery of unease. Elise, her auburn hair pinned tightly, clutched her handkerchief, her eyes darting with nervous energy. Brandt, rigid in his military bearing, stood apart, his gray eyes cold. Celeste, resplendent in sapphire silk, maintained her poised charm, though her smile was brittle. Pierre, the valet, fidgeted, his youthful face pale under scrutiny. Arnaud, spectacles glinting, exuded a clinical calm that Poirot distrusted. "Monsieur, Mesdames," Poirot began, his voice clear and measured. "A crime has been committed in this palace of beauty, a crime most foul. Victor Renard, struck down by poison, lies dead, and among us is the Viper who killed him." His words hung in the air, the suspects shifting uneasily. Poirot stood at the room's center, his small frame commanding, his mustache a precise curve. He held up the singed fragment of the diplomatic letter, its words, "The treaty must not," a silent accusation. This letter, and the note, "Trust no one, the Viper strikes," point to a motive beyond passion or greed. But let us unravel the threads, He began with the crime's mechanics. The locked suite, the alkaloid poison, the champagne flute shattered on the floor. The door was locked, the key inside. Yet death entered. How? Poirot's eyes swept the now partially reconstructed was Poirot's next focus. He had pieced together fragments from the lobby, the fireplace, and the library's coded message. The letter exposed a plot to sell treaty secrets to a foreign power, naming a traitor, the Viper. "Each of you," Poirot said, "had reason to fear or desire this letter. Elise, betrayed by Renard's promises, might have sought revenge. Brandt's rivalry over the treaty gave him motive for elimination. Celeste's debts tied to Renard's IOUs threatened her empire. Pierre's humiliation fueled a personal vendetta. Arnaud's disgrace, linked to Renard's past, burned with resentment. The room grew tense, each suspect eyeing the others. Poirot paced, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm. "The champagne," he said, "was the instrument of death. Ordered by Renard, served by Pierre, but switched during a distraction." He revealed a new clue. A waiter had seen a second glass brought to the suite, unnoticed in the evening's chaos. The killer poured the poison, then fled via the passage, locking the door to create the illusion of impossibility. Celeste's fan paused mid-motion. Pierre's hands twisted his cap. Poirot watched their reactions, seeking the telltale slip. He baited them further, mentioning the vial from Elise's bag, confirmed as perfume, not poison. "A red herring," he said. "But whose?" Elise's relief was palpable, but Brant's scowl deepened. The coded message to HB found in the library implicated Brant, yet he dismissed it as forgery. "I am no spy," he growled. Poirot noted the protest's vehemence, wondering if Brant's ambition masked a traitor's heart. The burned match in Renard's suite, a non-smoker's room, pointed to someone. Celeste, perhaps, despite her denial of smoking, or Arnaud, whose medical kit might include such tools. The detective's gaze settled on Pierre, whose nocturnal visit to the suite glimpsed the previous night raised alarms. "You returned, Monsieur Laurent, via the passage. Here, their masks slipping under pressure." Poirot's net was closing, but he needed one final push to expose the truth. He staged a calculated misdirection. "The cufflink, with PL, suggests our young valet," he said, watching Pierre blanch. "Yet it is too convenient, no? A planted clue, like the cigarette case, the glove." Pierre's relief was short-lived as Poirot added, "But your presence in the suite last night, monsieur, cannot be ignored." The valet's hands shook, and Poirot shifted to Celeste. "Madam, your photograph with Renard, and another with a man called the Viper, raises questions." Celeste's composure faltered, her voice sharp. "That photograph is old, meaningless." But her eyes betrayed fear. Brant interrupted, his voice cutting. "This is theater, Poirot. Accuse someone or let us go." Poirot smiled, unruffled. "Patience, Colonel. The truth emerges like a star at dusk." He mentioned the skeleton key, its whereabouts still unclear, and the scratched balcony lock, a distraction he suspected to obscure the passage's role. The burned fabric near the balcony, the coded messages, the match, all pointed to a killer orchestrating chaos. But whose hand pulled the strings? The salon's air grew heavy, the suspect's silence a chorus of guilt and fear. Poirot's mind raced, aligning clues. The passage explained access, the poison demanded expertise, the letter tied to espionage. Arnaud's medical knowledge, Celeste's control of the hotel, Pierre's access, Brant's ambition, Elise's passion, each fit, yet none fully. The Viper's code name, mentioned in the letter and note, suggested a mastermind, not a scorned lover or humiliated servant. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he announced, "Mes amis, I know the killer's identity. Tomorrow, in this room, all will be revealed." The suspects froze, their faces a tableau of dread. Elise's handkerchief fell to the floor. Brant's jaw tightened. Hercule Poirot, his mind a labyrinth of clues and deductions, had stirred the suspect's fears in the grand salon, planting seeds of doubt to provoke a misstep. The viper, he knew, was among them. Elise Moreau, Colonel Hugo Brandt, Madame Celeste Dubois, Pierre Laurent, or Dr. Felix Arnaud, and the false trails they laid were crumbling under his scrutiny. Tonight, Poirot would push further, baiting the killer into a fatal error. The detective stood in the hotel's library, its shelves heavy with leather-bound tomes and the air thick with the scent of aged paper. The room, lit by soft lamps, was a haven of quiet, yet it pulsed with the case's secrets. The coded message to HB, found here days ago, had named the viper and hinted at a treaty's betrayal. Poirot's little gray cells churned, piecing together the fragments. The hidden passage, the alkaloid poison, the missing diplomatic letter, the planted clues, cufflink, glove, cigarette case. Each suspect's motive, love, ambition, money, revenge, disgrace, interwove, but the killer's hand remained elusive. Poirot had summoned the suspects again, this time to the hotel's terrace, where the Mediterranean's waves whispered below and stars pricked the velvet sky. The setting was deliberate, open, exposed, where nervous glances could not hide. As they gathered, their faces betrayed strain. Elise, her auburn hair loose, clutched her arms as if chilled. Brandt's military posture was rigid, his eyes scanning the group like a hawk. Celeste, in a silver gown, radiated control, though her fan flicked restlessly. Pierre, the valet, shuffled, his youthful face etched with fear. Arnaud's spectacles glinted, his calm a thin veneer over something taut. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice carrying over the sea's murmur. "The net tightens, and the viper grows restless. Let us examine the trails, true and false, that lead to the truth." He held up Elise's vial, now confirmed, as Poirot shifted to Pierre, the valet, whose cufflink, PL, had been found in Renard's suite. "Monsieur Laurent, this clue points to you, yet it is too obvious, oui? A killer does not leave his mark so carelessly." Pierre's shoulders slumped, relief fleeting as Poirot added, "But your nocturnal visit to the suite betrays intent. What did you seek?" Pierre stammered. I thought I left something, a tray." His lie was feeble, and Celeste's eyes narrowed, as if sensing his vulnerability. Poirot let the accusation linger, watching for reactions. To Celeste, he mentioned the photograph from her safe showing her with Renard, and another, with a man labeled the Viper. "Madame, your ties to Renard run deep. Was this Viper your ally or your enemy?" Celeste's fan snapped shut. "That photo is ancient history," she said, her voice icy. "I knew no Viper," but her composure wavered, and Poirot noted her glance toward Arnaud. The doctor, silent thus far, adjusted his spectacles. "You chase shadows, Monsieur Poirot," he said, but his voice held a tremor. Poirot wove the clues together. The hidden passage, used to enter the locked suite. The poison, requiring expertise. The letter, exposing a traitor. "The champagne," he said, "was switched. A second glass brought during a distraction. The killer used the passage, poured the alkaloid, and fled, locking the door to create a mystery." He revealed a new detail. A waiter had seen a figure in a cloak near the passage's entrance, not on the balcony as the groundskeeper claimed. The glove with E was a plant, meant to frame Elise, just as the cufflink targeted Pierre and the cigarette case implicated Arnaud. The suspects stirred, their unease palpable. Poirot pressed his advantage, suggesting Elise's vial was a deliberate frame. Someone wished to divert suspicion, he said, but the true poison came from another source. He produced Arnaud's unlabeled bottle, still under analysis. "Doctor, your kit holds secrets, non?" Arnaud's face remained impassive. "Was unrelated. A gardener's rag, discarded carelessly. The killer wishes us to chase ghosts," he said, watching Brant's scowl deepen. Elise, emboldened, accused Pierre. "He hated Victor. He served the champagne." Pierre retorted, pointing to Celeste. "She owed him money. She'd do anything to save this place." Celeste's laugh was sharp. "And you, Pierre, skulking in passages like a thief?" The accusations flew, each suspect deflecting blame. Poirot observed, noting Brant's silence, Arnaud's stillness, Celeste's calculated calm. The web was fraying, the killer's desperation rising. He revealed another clue. The skeleton key, requested by Brant but controlled by Celeste, was missing from the hotel's records. "Someone," Poirot said, "used it to enter the suite, or to ensure it appeared locked." Celeste's eyes flashed, but she said nothing. Pierre's hands shook, and Arnaud's spectacles glinted as he shifted. The detective's mind raced, aligning the clues. The passage explained access. The poison demanded expertise. The letter tied to espionage. The cufflink, glove, and cigarette case were distractions, planted to confuse. But the burned match, the coded message, the second bottle, these were real, pointing to a cunning mind. Poirot baited one last trap. "The letter's final fragment," he lied, "names the viper explicitly. I have it, and tomorrow all will be clear." He watched their faces. Elise's fear, Brant's fury, Celeste's calculation, Pierre's panic, Arnaud's stillness. As the suspects dispersed, the terrace fell silent, the sea's rhythm a solemn underscore. Poirot lingered, the stars above mirroring his thoughts, points of light in a dark puzzle. Of Ambassador Victor Renard had woven a web of suspicion, and Hercule Poirot, his little gray cells ablaze, stood on the cusp of unraveling it. The second poisoning attempt, targeting Elise Moreau with a spiked glass of wine, had electrified the investigation, revealing the viper's desperation. The alkaloid's bitter trace, identical to that which killed Renard, confirmed the killer's presence among them. In the hotel's shadowed corridors, Poirot prepared to spring a trap, baiting the viper into a final, fatal misstep. The detective stood in his temporary office, a small parlor overlooking the Mediterranean's inky expanse. The room was modest compared to the palace's grandeur, its desk strewn with notes, the diplomatic letters fragments, the coded message to HB, the cryptic note warning of the viper. Clues littered his mind like scattered stars. The hidden passage, the planted cufflink, glove and cigarette case, the burned match, Arnaud's unlabeled bottle. The suspects, Elise, Brandt, Celeste, Pierre, Arnaud, each held a motive: betrayal, ambition, desperation, revenge, disgrace. Tonight, Poirot would force the truth into the light. He began by analyzing the second poisoning. Elise had received the wine anonymously, delivered to her room with a note, a peace offering. She had sensed a bitter odor and refused it, alerting the staff. The chemist in Nice, analyzing the residue, confirmed the alkaloid's presence, linking it to Renard's death. The attempt suggested Elise knew something, or was perceived to. Poirot recalled her tearful interview, her vial a false lead, her glove a planted clue. Was she a target to silence her, or a distraction to shield the true viper? Poirot summoned the suspects to the hotel's conservatory, a glass-domed haven filled with ferns and orchids, the air heavy with earth and bloom. The setting was deliberate. Its transparency left no place to hide, and the faint rustle of leaves amplified every nervous shift. The suspects arrived, their faces etched with strain. Elise, pale and trembling, clutched a traitor. The hidden passage known to Pierre and Celeste explained the locked door's mystery. The killer, Poirot said, entered unseen, swapped the glass and fled, leaving a locked room to confound us. He held up the letter's reconstructed fragments, now nearly complete. The treaty must not reach Berlin. The viper betrays us. The words hung heavy, implicating espionage. Brandt's jaw tightened, Celeste's fan stilled. Poirot wove the clues together. The cufflink with PL targeted Pierre, the glove with E pointed to Elise, the cigarette case with FA implicated Arnaud. All false, he declared, planted to sow chaos. The burned match, the coded message to HB, Arnaud's bottle. These were real, but their meaning twisted. The skeleton key missing from Celeste's records suggested access beyond the passage. Someone, Poirot said, orchestrated this deception with care. But the viper's hand falters. He turned to the second poisoning. The wine, meant for Elise, was a desperate act. The killer fears her knowledge, or wishes us to think so. Elise's eyes widened, but she remained silent. Poirot baited the trap further, revealing a fabricated clue. The letter's final fragment, recovered today, names the viper explicitly. I hold it now. He patted his pocket, watching their reactions. Brandt's scowl deepened. Celeste's lips parted. Pierre's hands shook. Arnaud's gaze was unreadable. The lie was calculated to provoke, and it did. Celeste's fan snapped open, a nervous tick. Poirot pressed Arnaud, whose medical expertise aligned with the poison's rarity. Doctor, your bottle. Saline, you claim. But a second, hidden in your bag, awaits testing. A physician knows alkaloids. Arnaud's voice was steady. Test it, Monsieur Poirot. I hide nothing. But his fingers adjusted his spectacles, a tell Poirot noted. The cigarette case with Arnaud's initials was too obvious, yet his past disgrace, tied to Brandt's glance at him sharp and warning. The cufflink meant to frame Pierre suggested a killer, deflecting blame. But Pierre's grudge, Renard's humiliation, gave him motive, and his access to the champagne was damning. Was he a pawn, or the viper's hand? Brandt's coded message found in his room was Poirot's next point. Colonel, your ambition clashed with Renard's treaty. This note, Viper awaits, bears your initials. Brant's voice was a growl. Planted, like the rest. I'm no spy. But his military connections could source the alkaloid, and his skeleton key request raised questions. Elise, silent until now, accused Brant. You met someone that night, in secret. Brant's denial was swift, but Poirot caught a flicker of unease. To stir the pot, Poirot suggested a false trail. The passage's entrance, tampered with the previous night, bore no fingerprints, a lie to gauge reactions. Arnaud's calm held. Celeste's fan flicked faster. Pierre's eyes darted. Brant's hands clenched. The detective revealed a true clue. The wine's delivery note, unsigned, was written in a hand matching none of the suspects, suggesting an unseen accomplice. The group's tension spiked, each eyeing the others, suspicion fracturing their facades. Poirot staged his trap. Tomorrow, he declared, I will reveal the viper, with the letter's final proof. He dismissed them, watching as they scattered. Celeste with measured steps, Brant with a soldier's stride, Pierre stumbling, Elise fleeing, Arnaud lingering. Alone in the conservatory, Poirot stood among the orchids. The seas murmur a counterpoint to his thoughts. The second poisoning was a desperate act, the killer fearing exposure. The passage, the poison, the letter, all pointed to a mastermind. But the false clues clouded the truth. In his parlor, Poirot reviewed the silent witness to the unraveling of its darkest secret. The murder of Ambassador Victor Renard had cast a shadow over its opulent halls. But Hercule Poirot, his little gray cells alight with clarity, was poised to bring the truth to light. The viper's desperate strike, the attempted poisoning of Elise Moreau, had confirmed the killer's presence, and the chase through the hidden passage had tightened the net. In the hotel's library, a sanctuary of leather-bound tomes and flickering lamplight, Poirot gathered the suspects for the final revelation, ready to unmask the viper. The library's air was heavy with the scent of aged paper and anticipation. The suspects, Elise Moreau, Colonel Hugo Brant, Madame Celeste Dubois, Pierre Laurent, and Dr. Felix Arnaud, sat in a semicircle, their faces a gallery of dread and defiance. Elise's hands trembled, her auburn hair framing a pale face. Brant's military posture was rigid, his gray eyes wary. Celeste, in a charcoal gown, maintained her poised facade, though her fan lay still. Pierre's youthful features were etched with fear, his hands twisting a cap. Arnaud's spectacles glinted, his calm a brittle shell. Poirot stood before them, his small frame commanding, his mustache a precise curve. Mes amis, Poirot began, his voice clear as a bell. The viper has struck, but the game is over. Victor Renard's murder, a puzzle of poison and deceit, is solved. The truth lies in the clues, and Hercule Poirot sees all. He held up the reconstructed diplomatic letter, its fragments pieced together. The treaty must not reach Berlin. The viper betrays us. The words, stark and damning, named a traitor selling secrets to a foreign power. The note, "Trust no one, the viper strikes," was Renard's final warning, written in fear of his doom. Poirot recounted the crime. Renard, poisoned by a rare alkaloid in his champagne, found dead in a locked suite. The hidden passage, known to Pierre and Celeste, Poirot said, could be the Viper, but only one fits all. He revealed the breakthrough, the syringe found in the passage, its residue matching the alkaloid. This, Poirot said, holding up the evidence, was the Viper's tool, hidden until desperation forced its use. The second poisoning attempt on Elise confirmed the killer's fear. She knew something, or was made to seem so. Poirot's trap, the false claim of the letter's final fragment, had provoked the Viper's move, leading to the chase in the passage. The burned scrap, bearing the Viper's codename, was the final clue. Poirot's eyes settled on Dr. Felix Arnaud. Monsieur le Docteur, you are the Viper. The room froze, Arnaud's spectacles glinting as he leaned forward. Preposterous, he said, his voice steady but strained. Poirot raised a hand. Your past, disgraced by Renard's accusations, gave motive. Your medical expertise sourced the alkaloid. The syringe, hidden in your bag's compartment, delivered it. Arnaud's calm cracked, his lips parting, but Poirot continued, relentless. The cigarette case with F.A. was a misdirection, Poirot said. Planted by you to seem framed. But the second bottle, hidden in your bag, contained the poison, confirmed by the chemist in Nice. Arnaud's disgrace, a scandal in diplomatic circles, had been Renard's doing, ruining his career. The letter, exposing a traitor, threatened to reveal Arnaud's past treachery, a deal to sell secrets, thwarted by Renard's vigilance. You killed to silence him, Poirot said, and to retrieve the letter. The passage, Poirot explained, was Arnaud's path. You knew it from Celeste, perhaps, or from your time here as a guest. You entered, swapped the glass during a distraction, Renard's focus on his papers, and fled, locking the door. The burned match was Arnaud's error, used to destroy the letter's fragments but left behind. The coded message to HB was a ruse, planted to implicate Brandt. The glove, the cufflink, Arnaud's deceptions, framing Elise and Pierre to cloud the truth. Pierre's nocturnal visit was innocent, seeking a lost item. Brandt's ambition and Elise's heartbreak were exploited by Arnaud's cunning. The suspects stirred, their relief palpable as Arnaud's guilt crystallized. Elise sobbed. Brandt exhaled. Celeste's fan resumed its rhythm. Pierre's shoulders relaxed. Arnaud stood, his spectacles slipping. You cannot prove intent, he said, but his voice broke. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Intent, doctor, is in your actions. You confessed in the passage when you thought none heard. Poirot had overheard Arnaud's mutterings, self-incriminating fragments during the chase. Arnaud's composure collapsed, his face ashen. Renard destroyed me, he spat. He deserved it. The confession, raw and bitter, filled the library. He had sourced the alkaloid from old contacts, used the passage to strike, and planted clues to frame others. The letter, exposing his past, was his target, but Renard's death ensured silence. The second attempt on Elise was a miscalculation, born of fear she knew his codename. Poirot signaled the gendarmes, waiting discreetly outside. Arnaud was led away, his clinical calm replaced by defeat. The library fell silent, the suspects dispersing, their burdens lifted. Elise fled to her room. Brandt strode off. Celeste resumed her duties. Pierre vanished to the kitchens. Poirot remained, sipping tea brought by a porter, the sea's murmur a soothing backdrop. The letter, now secured, would reach the authorities, its secrets safe. The viper was caged, the palace cleansed. In the quiet, Poirot reflected on the case's elegance. The false trails, cufflink, glove, cigarette case, had nearly deceived him, but the syringe, the match, the letter's truth prevailed. The Riviera Palace, its glamour restored, would hum again with life. Poirot's holiday, briefly derailed, could resume. He smiled, his mustache curling,